At my retirement dinner, my new wife and stepchildren handed me divorce papers. Your pension is ours. You get nothing. My stepson laughed. Congrats on 40 years of wasting your life, old man. I nodded, took out my pen, and signed everything. Understood, I said. I cleared my office and disappeared. 3 days later, received 343 frantic calls because it happened earlier than they planned. They lost everything first. The retirement dinner was supposed to be elegant. That's what I kept telling myself as I stood in the lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel, adjusting my tie in the reflection of a brass plaque commemorating some banker from 1987. The tie was silk, dark blue with silver threading, and it had cost more than my first car. Patricia had picked it out 3 weeks ago, insisting that I needed to look the part for my own retirement celebration. You've worked 40 years for this moment, Richard, she'd said, holding the tie up to my chest in the department store, her manicured nails catching the fluorescent light. You deserve to look distinguished. I'd smiled and nodded, the way I'd learned to do over the 2 years of our marriage. The way you smile when someone tells you what you deserve, and you're too tired to argue about whether they're right. The lobby was all marble and gold accents, the kind of place that whispered old money even though it mostly hosted corporate events and wedding receptions for people trying to look wealthier than they were. Through the frosted glass doors of the Riverside Ballroom, I could see shadows moving, hear the gentle clink of glassware and the murmur of conversation. My colleagues, my friends, the people I'd spent the better part of 4 decades building something with. I was 63 years old, and I was about to walk into a room full of people who respected me. That should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt something cold settling in my chest, a sensation I couldn't name, like standing on ice you know is too thin, but being too far from shore to turn back. Patricia appeared in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of the ballroom. She was wearing the emerald dress we'd picked out together. Or rather, the emerald dress she'd picked out while I'd sat in a chair outside the fitting room, holding her purse and nodding when she asked if it made her look younger. It did. She was 48, 15 years my junior, and she had the kind of beauty that required maintenance, regular salon appointments, personal trainers, dermatologists who did things with lasers I didn't fully understand. She was stunning. She was also flanked by her 2 children. Our children now, technically, though they'd never called me anything but Richard. Brandon was 26, tall and gym-sculpted, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no by anyone who mattered. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my tie, and his smile was the smile of someone who thought the world was a game he was winning. Jessica was 23, her mother's daughter in every way that counted, beautiful, polished, calculated. Her dress was black and tasteful, her makeup flawless, her jewelry understated but obviously expensive. She had her mother's eyes, sharp and assessing, always calculating value. There you are, Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular lilt she used in public, the one that was 2 degrees warmer than her private tone. She crossed the lobby and kissed my cheek, her perfume expensive and cloying. Everyone's waiting. Are you ready? I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be ready for, but I nodded anyway. Ready as I'll ever be. Brandon clapped me on the shoulder with a force that was just this side of too hard. Big night, Richard. Bet you never thought you'd make it this far, huh? There was something in the way he said it, an edge, a sharpness, that made me pause. But before I could parse it, Jessica linked her arm through mine, leaning her head briefly against my shoulder in a gesture that might have looked affectionate to anyone watching. We're so proud of you, she said. And I believed her, because I wanted to. That was my first mistake. The ballroom was more crowded than I'd expected. I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised. 40 years at Grayson and Associates wasn't something people ignored. I'd started as a junior analyst fresh out of college, back when the firm was small enough that everyone knew everyone's coffee order. I'd worked my way up through diligence and patience, the old-fashioned way. No shortcuts, no politics, just solid work and long hours. By the time I made senior partner, I'd helped build the firm into one of the most respected financial advisory companies on the West Coast. People respected me because I'd earned it. The room itself was decorated in tasteful neutrals, cream and gold, with centerpieces of white roses and candles that cast everything in warm, flattering light. Round tables filled the space, each one seating 8, each one occupied by faces I recognized. Colleagues, clients, old friends from university, even a few competitors who respected me enough to show up. At the front of the room, on a small stage, someone had set up a podium with a microphone. Behind it hung a projection screen displaying a photo of me from 20 years ago, standing in front of the old office building, shaking hands with the firm's founder. I looked younger in the photo, happier maybe, or maybe just less tired. Patricia guided me through the crowd, her hand resting lightly on my lower back, steering me like a show dog at Westminster. People stood as we passed, shaking my hand, offering congratulations, telling stories I'd heard 100 times before. Richard, remember when you saved the Morrison account? Richard, that presentation you gave in Dallas, legendary. Richard, you're a goddamn institution. I smiled and thanked them and felt the cold thing in my chest growing colder. We reached the head table, where Patricia's children were already seated, along with Marcus Grayson, the current managing partner, and his wife, Diane. Marcus stood and embraced me, his grip firm and genuine. You earned this, Rich, he said quietly. Every damn bit of it. I wanted to believe him. The dinner itself was a blur of courses I barely tasted. Some kind of salad with goat cheese and candied walnuts. A filet mignon that was cooked perfectly but tasted like cardboard in my mouth. A dessert that was more art than food. Throughout it all, Patricia played the role of devoted wife with practiced ease, laughing at the right moments, touching my arm affectionately, leaning in to whisper comments that were just intimate enough to look loving, but just cold enough to remind me that this was a performance. Brandon and Jessica played their parts too, the dutiful stepchildren, occasionally raising their glasses and toasts, smiling when people looked our way. But I noticed things. Small things, the kind you notice when you've spent 40 years analyzing data and learning to spot patterns in chaos. I noticed the way Brandon checked his phone under the table every few minutes, his expression flickering between anticipation and impatience. I noticed the way Jessica kept glancing at her mother, some silent communication passing between them that I wasn't privy to. I noticed the way Patricia's smile never quite reached her eyes. And I noticed the manila envelope sitting on the empty chair beside Brandon, crisp and official looking, out of place among the wine glasses and dessert plates. When Marcus stood to give his speech, the room fell silent. He was good at this, the kind of speaker who could command a room without raising his voice, who could make people laugh and tear up in the same breath. He talked about my career, about my dedication, about the countless times I'd gone above and beyond. He told stories about late nights in the office, about my mentorship of younger associates, about my unwavering integrity. Richard Thornton, he concluded, raising his glass, is the kind of man who makes everyone around him better. He's the kind of man you want in your corner, the kind of man who does the right thing even when it's hard. The kind of man who built this firm into what it is today. Richard, we're going to miss the hell out of you, but you've more than earned your rest. To Richard, the room echoed, and 100 glasses caught the candlelight. I stood and accepted the applause, feeling it wash over me like water, like noise, like something that should have meant more than it did. I gave a short speech. I don't remember what I said, something about gratitude and friendship and new chapters, and then I sat back down, and Patricia's hand found mine under the table. Her grip was cold. That was perfect, she whispered. And then Brandon stood. He didn't ask permission, didn't wait for Marcus to introduce him or for anyone to cue him. He just stood, picked up the manila envelope, and tapped his wine glass with a fork until the room quieted again. Sorry to interrupt, he said, his voice carrying that same edge I'd heard in the lobby. But there's one more thing we need to take care of tonight. I felt Patricia's hand tighten on mine. See, Richard here has been talking about retirement for months now, Brandon continued, his smile sharp, his eyes bright with something that looked almost like excitement. And my mom, Patricia, well, she's been planning this night down to the last detail, making sure everything was perfect for him. He walked around the table toward me, the envelope in his hands. But here's the thing about retirement, he said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality, like he was performing for the room. It's not just about celebrating the past. It's about planning for the future, making sure everyone knows where they stand. He stopped beside my chair and dropped the envelope on the table in front of me. It landed with a soft thump that somehow seemed louder than it should have. Patricia, Jess, and we've been thinking a lot about the future, Brandon said. About finances, about security, about what's fair. And we realized that some things need to be made official, legal, clear. I stared at the envelope. So go ahead, Richard, Brandon said, his smile widening. Open it. Let's make sure everyone understands how this works. My hands moved before my brain fully caught up. I picked up the envelope, felt the weight of the papers inside, broke the seal. Inside were divorce papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage, the header read. Petitioner, Patricia and Thornton. Respondent, Richard James Thornton. The room was silent. I could feel people watching, could sense the confusion rippling through the crowd. Someone coughed. A glass clinked. But mostly, there was just silence and the sound of my own heartbeat. I flipped through the pages, my eyes catching fragments of legalese, irreconcilable differences, equitable distribution of assets. Petitioner requests sole claim to respondent's pension benefits. My pension. 40 years of pension contributions. 40 years of deferred compensation. 40 years of building toward a secure retirement. It was worth just over $2 million. Your pension is ours, Patricia said, her voice steady, almost businesslike. She dropped the warm public tone entirely. You get nothing. I looked up at her. She was watching me with those calculating eyes, her expression neutral, professional, like we were in a boardroom negotiation rather than at my retirement dinner. Brandon leaned down, his mouth close to my ear, his voice pitched just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Congrats on 40 years of wasting your life, old man, he said. At least someone gets something out of it. And he laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, exactly. It was worse than that. It was the laugh of someone who genuinely found the situation amusing, who saw no problem with what was happening, who felt entitled to every cent they were taking. Jessica was smiling too, I noticed. Not laughing, but smiling. A small, satisfied smile that said she'd been waiting for this moment. I looked around the room. People were staring. Some looked confused. Some looked horrified. Marcus had gone pale, his mouth slightly open, like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out what. I looked back down at the papers. And then I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I took out my pen. It was a Mont Blanc, black and silver, a gift from the firm on my 30th anniversary. I unscrewed the cap slowly, deliberately, and turned to the last page where the signature lines waited. Richard, what are you? Patricia started. I signed my name. Richard James Thornton. In the firm, neat handwriting I'd perfected over 4 decades of signing documents and contracts and letters. I dated it. I even initialed the margins where required. Then I closed the folder, set my pen down beside it, and looked up at Patricia. Understood, I said. My voice was calm, quiet, almost gentle. Brandon's smile faltered slightly. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Patricia's face remained neutral, but I saw something flicker there, surprise, maybe, or suspicion. I stood, smoothed down my jacket, and picked up the signed papers. I assume you'll want these filed quickly, I said, handing them to Patricia. I'll make sure not to contest anything. I want this to be as clean as possible. Richard, Marcus started, half rising from his seat. I held up a hand. It's fine, Marcus. Really, I appreciate everything you've said tonight. I appreciate everyone being here. But I looked around the room, at all those confused, concerned faces. I think it's time for me to go. I walked away from the table. The room was silent except for my footsteps and the rustle of my jacket. I didn't look back, didn't say goodbye. I just walked through that ballroom, through the lobby with its brass plaques and marble floors, and out into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear Patricia calling my name, her voice sharp with confusion and maybe anger. But I didn't stop. I got in my car, a sensible Honda Accord I'd driven for 8 years, and I drove home. Except I didn't go home. I couldn't, because home was the house Patricia and I shared, the house she'd moved into after we got married, the house that was in both our names, and that would now, presumably, be hers. Instead, I drove to my office. Grayson and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass and steel building in the financial district. My office was on the top floor, corner suite, with windows overlooking the river and the bridge and the city lights that looked like stars fallen to earth. I'd spent more time in that office than I'd spent in any home I'd ever lived in. The security guard, Jimmy, was working the night shift. He'd been with the building for 15 years, and we developed the kind of easy friendship that comes from years of late-night encounters. "Mr. Thornton," he said, surprise evident in his voice as I signed in. "Thought you'd be out celebrating." "Change of plans," I said. He must have seen something in my face, because he didn't ask any more questions. Just nodded and waved me through. The office was eerily quiet at night. Emergency lighting cast everything in shadows, and my footsteps echoed on the polished floors. I took the elevator up to the 32nd floor and walked down the familiar hallway to my office. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning. The desk with its neat stacks of files, the credenza with photos of, well, photos that would need to go, the bookshelf lined with finance texts and reference materials, the leather chair I'd sat in for 20 years. I turned on the desk lamp and sat down. For a long moment, I just sat there in the circle of light, staring at the surface of my desk, at the pen holder and the paperweight, and the framed photo of Patricia from our wedding day. She'd looked so happy that day. Or maybe I just wanted to believe she was happy. I'd met Patricia 2.5 years ago at a charity fundraiser. I'd been a widower for 3 years at that point. My first wife, Caroline, had died of cancer after a long, brutal fight that had drained us both emotionally and financially. The hospital bills alone had eaten through most of our savings, and by the time she passed, I'd been left with grief and exhaustion and a house that felt too big and too empty. Patricia had been volunteer coordinator for the event. She'd approached me at the bar, introduced herself, made me laugh for the first time in months. She'd been warm and engaging and interested in what I had to say. We'd started dating, slowly at first, then more seriously. She'd told me about her difficult divorce, about raising 2 kids on her own, about struggling to make ends meet. I'd wanted to help. More than that, I'd wanted to feel useful again, to feel like I could protect someone, to feel like I wasn't just alone. We'd gotten married after a year of dating. Quick, maybe, but we'd both been older, both knew what we wanted. Or at least, I thought we did. Her kids had been polite at first. Distant, but polite. Brandon had been finishing his MBA. Jessica had been working in marketing for a tech startup. They'd both moved in with us after the wedding. Just until they get on their feet, Patricia had said. They were still living with us. And now they'd just taken my pension. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk and took out the bottle of scotch I kept there for special occasions. I poured 2 fingers into a coffee mug. I'd never bothered keeping proper glassware in the office, and drank it in one swallow. It burned, but it cleared my head. Then I started packing. People accumulate a lot of things in 40 years. Files and folders, personal items and gifts, awards and commendations, photos and mementos. My office was full of them, testament to a career built slowly and carefully, brick by brick, year by year. I packed methodically, the way I did everything. I had 3 cardboard boxes that the office supply closet kept stocked, and I filled them with the things that mattered. My personal files, my notebooks, my reference materials, my own copies of contracts and agreements I'd negotiated over the years. I left the awards on the walls. I left the photos of Patricia and her children. I left the expensive pen set she'd given me for our first anniversary. I took the things that were mine. It was almost 2 in the morning when I finished. I stood in my office one last time, looking at the empty desk, the bare credenza, the walls still decorated with commendations that now felt like they belonged to someone else. I thought about leaving a note for Marcus, but what would I say? Thanks for everything. Sorry about the dinner. I'll be in touch. In the end, I just turned off the light and left. Jimmy was still at the desk when I came down with my 3 boxes. He looked at them, then at me, and understanding passed between us without words. "You need help loading those?" he asked. "I've got it. Thanks, Jimmy. Take care of yourself, Mr. Thornton. You too." I loaded the boxes into my trunk, got in the car, and drove. I ended up at a motel on the outskirts of town. Not because I couldn't afford better. Despite everything, I still had my savings, my own bank accounts that Patricia hadn't had access to, but because I needed. Somewhere anonymous, somewhere no one would think to look for me. The Starlight Motor Inn was exactly what it sounded like. 2 stories of dated rooms wrapped around a parking lot, with a flickering neon sign and a front desk staffed by a kid who barely looked up from his phone when I checked in. The room smelled like old cigarettes and industrial cleaner. The bed sagged in the middle. The TV got 3 channels. The bathroom had one of those phones from the 1980s mounted on the wall, the kind you only ever saw in motels and hospitals. It was perfect. I set my boxes down, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled out my phone. I had 37 missed calls. 15 from Patricia, 8 from Brandon, 6 from Jessica, 5 from Marcus, 3 from other colleagues. I had 48 unread text messages. I read through them in chronological order, watching the tone shift from confused to angry to panicked. Patricia, where are you? We need to talk. Patricia, Richard, this is ridiculous. Come home. Patricia, you can't just leave like this. We have things to discuss. Brandon, seriously, dude? Way to make a scene. Marcus, Richard, call me when you get this. We're all worried. Jessica, mom's freaking out. Where did you go? Patricia, I'm calling the police if you don't answer. Patricia, fine. Be childish. We'll handle the paperwork without you. I turned my phone off and set it on the nightstand. Then I lay back on the sagging motel bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling and felt absolutely nothing. I stayed at the Starlight for 3 days. During that time, I did very little. I slept more than I had in years, 10, 12 hours at a stretch, the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that felt like falling into a dark well. I ate sparingly, vending machine snacks, coffee from the lobby, 1 meal a day from the diner across the street. I didn't turn my phone back on. I didn't check email. I didn't contact anyone. I just existed. There's something clarifying about stripping your life down to its most basic elements. Sleep, food, silence. In the absence of everything else, the job, the marriage, the expectations, the performance, you start to see yourself more clearly. And what I saw was this. I'd spent 2 years trying to build a family with people who saw me as a resource to be extracted. I'd seen the signs. Of course I had. I'd spent 40 years analyzing risk and spotting red flags in financial statements. I knew how to read between the lines, how to spot when numbers didn't add up, how to sense when someone was selling you something too good to be true. But I'd ignored all of it because I'd been lonely. Because after Caroline died, I'd been so desperately lonely that I'd convinced myself Patricia's interest was genuine, that her children's eventual warmth was real, that I was building something that mattered. The truth was simpler and sadder. They'd seen a 61-year-old widower with a healthy pension and no kids of his own, and they'd seen an opportunity. I'd been a retirement plan. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Maybe I was too tired to hurt. Maybe I'd used up all my capacity for pain watching Caroline die. Maybe I'd seen enough betrayal in my career, clients who lied, partners who stole, competitors who cheated. That one more betrayal just felt like confirmation of something I already knew about the world. People were disappointing. On the 3rd day, I turned my phone back on. It exploded with notifications. 343 missed calls. 572 text messages. 116 voicemails. Dozens of emails. I didn't read any of them. I just scrolled through the call log, watching the names repeat. Patricia, Brandon, Jessica, Marcus, other colleagues. Numbers I didn't recognize. The frequency told a story. Frantic attempts to reach me in the first 24 hours, then increasing desperation, then something that looked almost like panic. I opened one text message, just to see. It was from Patricia, sent 2 hours ago. Richard, please. You don't understand what you've done. Call me. Urgent. I almost laughed. What I'd done. I called Marcus instead. He answered on the first ring. Jesus Christ, Richard. Where the hell have you been? We've been, are you okay? Are you hurt? We filed a missing persons report 2 days ago. His voice was tight with worry and anger and relief all mixed together, and I felt a small pang of guilt for putting him through that. I'm fine, Marcus. I'm sorry I worried you. Sorry? Richard, you vanished. You signed divorce papers in front of 100 people and then disappeared. Your wife, ex-wife, whatever. She's been calling here nonstop. She's been to the police. She's threatening to. He stopped, took a breath. Where are you? Somewhere quiet. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. Silence on the line. Then, what the hell happened at that dinner, Rich? You were there. You saw. I saw some kind of ambush. I saw Patricia and her kids blindside you with divorce papers. I saw them try to humiliate you. And then I saw you sign them and walk out like it was nothing. And I've been trying to figure out if you're having some kind of breakdown or if you're the sanest person I know. Maybe both, I said. Richard. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to tell me exactly what's been happening. At the firm, I mean. With my accounts. My pension. Everything financial. Another pause. Why? Because I need to understand what's happening. And because you're the only person I trust to tell me the truth. I heard him sigh, heard the creak of his office chair as he leaned back. Your wife, Patricia, she's been calling every day, multiple times a day. She wants to know about your pension distribution, about when the money will be available, about how to expedite the process. She has a lawyer now, some aggressive guy from downtown. They're pushing hard to finalize everything as quickly as possible. What did you tell them? I told them that pension distributions are complex and that there are legal procedures that have to be followed and that it would take time. I've been stalling. Why? Because something felt wrong, Rich. The whole thing felt wrong. The dinner, the papers, the way they were pushing so hard. It felt like a con. And you just signing everything and disappearing? That felt wrong too. So I've been stalling until I could talk to you and figure out what the hell is actually going on. I closed my eyes and felt something like gratitude wash over me. Thank you, I said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Tell me what's happening. I need to ask you a question first. The pension fund, it's managed through the firm's benefits administrator, right? Yes. Thornton Financial Services, like always. And distributions don't happen automatically. They require specific documentation and approvals. Correct. Usually takes 60 to 90 days to process, sometimes longer depending on the circumstances. What about the beneficiary designations? Those are on file with the administrator. Should be. What? I need you to pull my beneficiary forms. I need to know exactly what's on file. Richard, what are you? Please, Marcus. Just pull them. I heard typing, heard him muttering to himself, heard the click of a mouse. Then silence. Marcus. Rich, according to the records here, your primary beneficiary is Patricia Thornton. 100% of the pension death benefit, and he stopped. Wait, there's a form here dated 3 months ago. Spousal consent for early distribution. Your signature and Patricia's notarized. My hands tightened on the phone. I never signed that form. What? I never signed any form about early distribution. I didn't even know such a form existed. More typing. Rich, if this signature is forged. It is. Then this is fraud. Serious fraud. Federal crime level fraud. I know. Jesus. Richard, you need to contact the police. You need to. No, I said. What do you mean, no? Not yet. I need you to do something else for me first. Richard, please. Trust me on this. I know what I'm doing. He was silent for a long moment. What do you need? I told him. Here's what I'd figured out during those 3 days of silence at the Starlight Motor Inn. Patricia hadn't just decided to divorce me at my retirement dinner. She'd been planning it for months, possibly longer. The timing wasn't random, it was calculated. She wanted to hit me at the moment when I was most vulnerable, most publicly exposed, when walking away would look like strength and fighting back would look like a humiliated old man making a scene. She'd counted on me being shocked, being hurt, being too proud to fight, and she'd counted on getting my pension. But here's what she didn't know. I'd spent 40 years in financial advisory. I'd helped hundreds of clients protect their assets, structure their estates, plan for retirement. I'd seen every kind of financial betrayal there was. Spouses hiding money, business partners cooking books, children stealing from elderly parents. I'd learned to spot the patterns, learned to read the warning signs, learned to protect people from the wolves that circled anyone with money. And somewhere, in the back of my mind, I'd been protecting myself. Not consciously, maybe. Not with any specific suspicion, but with the same careful diligence I'd applied to everything else in my life. 6 months ago, before I'd even announced my retirement, I'd updated my estate plan. It was routine, something I did every few years, just making sure everything was current and proper. But as part of that process, I'd reviewed all my beneficiary designations. Life insurance, retirement accounts, pension benefits. And I'd made a change. Not because I didn't trust Patricia, not because I suspected anything, but because my attorney had recommended it as a standard precaution for anyone in a second marriage. You want to make sure your assets are protected, he'd said. Make sure that if anything happens, your wishes are clear and legally sound, especially with stepchildren in the picture. So I created a trust, the Richard J. Thornton Revocable Living Trust, established 6 months ago, with explicit instructions about the distribution of my assets. The pension would go to the trust. The trust would be managed by an independent trustee, my attorney, a man I'd known for 30 years. And the trust had very specific language about what happened in the event of divorce. I'd named Patricia as a beneficiary, yes, but only during the marriage. The trust documents explicitly stated that in the event of divorce, Patricia would be removed as a beneficiary, and the funds would instead go to charitable organizations I'd designated: cancer research, hospice care, financial literacy programs for underserved communities. Patricia's lawyer would have known this if they'd done proper due diligence. They would have requested copies of my estate documents, my beneficiary designations, my trust agreements. But they'd been in a hurry. They'd assumed that a simple divorce decree would be enough to claim the pension. They'd assumed I was just a foolish old man who'd signed away his rights without understanding what he was doing. They'd assumed I'd be too hurt, too embarrassed, too broken to fight back. They'd assumed wrong. Over the next 2 days, I stayed at the motel and made phone calls. I called my attorney, David Brenner, and explained the situation. He was furious. Not at me, but at Patricia and her lawyer for attempting what was clearly fraud. "They forged your signature on a beneficiary change form," he said. "Richard, that's not just unethical, it's illegal. We need to report this immediately." "Not yet," I said. "I want to let them commit fully first." "What do you mean?" "I want to see how far they'll go. I want documentation of every fraudulent act, every false claim, every attempt to steal from me. I want this to be ironclad before we move." "Richard, that's risky. If they actually manage to get the funds distributed." "They won't. Because you're going to make sure the pension administrator has copies of the trust documents. You're going to make sure they know that any distribution to Patricia is void. You're going to freeze everything legally and properly. And then we wait." I called my accountant, Sarah Chun, who'd been managing my personal finances for 15 years. I explained what I needed: a complete audit of all joint accounts, all shared assets, every place where Patricia might have access to my money. "Richard, I'm so sorry," she said. "I should have caught this earlier. I should have. You couldn't have known. But I need you to lock everything down now. Move my personal accounts, change passwords, revoke any authorizations. I want a complete financial separation. Done. I'll have everything secured by tomorrow." I called the pension administrator, a woman named Margaret whom I'd worked with for 20 years on client accounts. I explained the situation, the forged signature, the fraudulent claim, the divorce. "Mr. Thornton, I'm horrified," she said. "Let me pull your account immediately. If there's been fraud, there has. And I need you to document everything. Every request Patricia makes, every form she submits, every claim her lawyer files. I want a complete paper trail. You're building a case." "Yes." "Good." She picked the wrong person to steal from. And finally, I called Marcus again. "What do you need?" he asked. "I need you to tell Patricia's lawyer that the pension distribution is being processed. I need you to string them along. Make them think it's happening." "Why?" "Because I want them confident. I want them to think they've won. And I want them to make mistakes." He was quiet for a moment. "You're setting them up." "They set themselves up. I'm just making sure they follow through." "Richard, you know I'll do whatever you need. But I have to ask, are you doing this for revenge?" I thought about that. "No," I said finally. "I'm doing this for justice. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Revenge is about hurting them. Justice is about making sure they can't hurt anyone else." On the 4th day, I checked out of the Starlight Motor Inn and drove 3 hours north to a small coastal town called Haven Point. I'd been there once before, years ago, on a weekend trip with Caroline. We'd stayed at a bed and breakfast, walked on the beach, eaten fresh seafood at a restaurant with views of the ocean. It had been peaceful and quiet, and exactly what we'd needed at the time. I rented a small cottage on the edge of town, a one-bedroom place with weathered shingles and a deck overlooking the water. The owner was an elderly woman named Mrs. Carlyle who asked no questions and accepted cash payment for a month in advance. "You running from something?" she asked as she handed me the keys. "No," I said. "Running towards something." She smiled. "That's usually better." The cottage was simple: a bedroom with a quilt-covered bed, a living room with a wood stove, a kitchen with old appliances that worked well enough, a bathroom with a shower that had excellent water pressure. The deck had 2 Adirondack chairs and a view that made everything else seem smaller. I unpacked my 3 boxes from the office, set up a workspace on the kitchen table, and settled in. And then I waited. The phone calls increased in frequency and desperation. I didn't answer any of them, but I listened to some of the voicemails. Patricia's voice shifted from annoyed to angry to panicked. Richard, I don't know what game you're playing, but it needs to stop. We have a legal agreement. You signed the papers. You need to honor that. Richard, the pension administrator, says there are complications with the distribution. What did you do? What did you tell them? Richard, answer your fucking phone. I swear to God, if you're sabotaging this. Brandon left messages too, his tone moving from smug to confused to threatening. Hey Rich, not sure what you think you're accomplishing here, but you're just making things harder on yourself. Just cooperate, and this'll be over quick. Dude, seriously, what's your problem? Mom's getting lawyers involved. You really want this to get ugly. You know what? Fuck you, Richard. We gave you a chance to do this with dignity. Now we're going to bury you. Even Jessica called, her voice tight with frustration. Richard, I don't understand why you're doing this. We're family. This doesn't have to be adversarial. Please, just call Mom back. Let's work this out like adults. The only messages I actually listened to in full were from Marcus, who kept me updated on what was happening at the firm. They're threatening to sue Rich. Patricia's lawyer filed a petition to compel distribution of the pension funds. They're claiming you're violating the divorce decree by withholding assets. The lawyer's getting aggressive. He's requesting all kinds of documentation, demanding meetings with the benefits administrator. He's making noise about going to the state regulatory board. Richard, I hope you know what you're doing. This is getting messy. I didn't know what I was doing. I was letting them commit every fraudulent act on record. I was letting them file false petitions and make false claims and submit forged documents. I was giving them enough rope. On day 7 of my disappearance, Marcus called with interesting news. They've escalated to the state attorney general's office, he said. Patricia's lawyer filed a complaint claiming that the firm is illegally withholding pension benefits from a divorced spouse. Good, I said. Good. That means state investigators will look into it. That means there'll be an official inquiry into the beneficiary forms, the signatures, the timeline. That means everything comes out. Rich, if they investigate and find out the signatures were forged, that's exactly what I want them to find. Understanding dawned in his voice. You're not the one being investigated. No, I said. I'm not. On day 9, my attorney called. The pension administrator flagged the beneficiary change form, David said. They brought in a forensic document examiner to analyze the signature. It's not a match, Richard. They can prove it's forged. How definitive is the analysis? Very. Different pen pressure, different letter formations, clear evidence of simulation. Someone trying to copy your signature rather than your actual signature. The examiner is willing to testify. Good. What else? I contacted the state attorney general's office directly. Explained that we have evidence of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. They're very interested. Apparently, Patricia's lawyer has been quite aggressive in his accusations against the firm, and they don't appreciate being misled. When do they want to move? Soon. They're building a case, but they need your cooperation. You'll need to come in, make a formal statement, provide documentation. I will, but not yet. Why not? Because I want to give Patricia one more chance to withdraw the claim voluntarily. I want to make it clear that she can walk away right now, before charges are filed. Richard, she tried to steal $2 million from you. She forged legal documents. She orchestrated an elaborate scheme to humiliate you and rob you. Why would you give her a chance to walk away? Because, I said quietly, I want her to know that I gave her that chance. I want her to know that what happens next is entirely her choice. I drafted an email. It took me 3 hours to get the tone right. Professional but clear, firm but not angry. Offering an out while making the consequences crystal clear. Dear Patricia, I'm writing to inform you that I'm aware of the forged signature on the pension beneficiary change form submitted to Thornton Financial Services. I have documentation proving that I did not sign this form and that it constitutes fraud. I'm also aware of the various legal maneuvers your attorney has attempted to force distribution of pension benefits that you are not entitled to under the terms of my estate plan. I'm prepared to provide all evidence of fraud and forgery to state investigators and to pursue both criminal and civil charges. However, I'm willing to offer you an alternative. Withdraw all claims to my pension immediately. Cease all legal proceedings related to the pension distribution. Sign a document acknowledging that you have no claim to these benefits. If you do this within 48 hours, I will not pursue criminal charges. The divorce will proceed as filed, and we'll make a clean break with no further contact. If you refuse, or if you continue to pursue fraudulent claims, I will provide all evidence to authorities and will pursue this matter to its fullest legal extent. The choice is yours. Richard. I read it over one more time, made a few minor edits, and sent it. Then I walked out onto the deck of my cottage and watched the sun set over the ocean. Patricia called within an hour. I didn't answer. She called again, and again, and again. On the fourth call, I answered. "You bastard," she screamed, her voice raw and furious. "You absolute fucking bastard." I held the phone away from my ear and waited for her to wind down. "How dare you?" she finally said, her voice dropping to something cold and venomous. "How dare you threaten me? How dare you accuse me of fraud? I'm your wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected gently. "You made that very clear at my retirement dinner. I didn't forge anything. I don't know what you're talking about." "Patricia, they have a forensic document examiner's report. They have testimony from handwriting experts. They have security camera footage from the notary's office showing that you were there alone, without me, on the day the form was supposedly signed. They have phone records showing coordination with your attorney weeks before you filed for divorce. They have everything." Silence. "This is your last chance," I said. "Withdraw the claim. Walk away. Accept the divorce on the terms you filed. Take whatever the court decides is equitable distribution of marital assets and move on with your life. And if I don't, then I turn over all evidence to the state attorney general's office, and you get charged with fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. Your lawyer gets disbarred, and you likely go to prison. You wouldn't. Try me." More silence. "I loved you," she said, and her voice broke slightly, a crack in the armor. "I actually loved you, Richard. This wasn't supposed to. We weren't supposed to. You loved my pension," I said. "Let's be honest about that. That's not fair." "You know what's not fair? 40 years of work. 40 years of building something. And you wanted to take it all in one night, in front of everyone I respected, like it was owed to you. I deserve something. I was your wife. I took care of you. You were my wife for 2 years. And you took care of your own interests. There's a difference." I could hear her breathing on the other end, harsh and ragged. "What about Brandon and Jessica?" she asked finally. "If I get charged, this affects them too. They were part of it, Patricia. They handed me the papers. They laughed. They celebrated. They're adults. They made their choices. They're my children. And I'm the person you tried to rob. We all have our priorities. You're really going to do this. You're really going to destroy our family. You destroyed it at the retirement dinner. I'm just documenting what happened." She hung up. 48 hours passed. Patricia did not withdraw her claim. Instead, her lawyer filed an emergency motion with the court, claiming that I was engaging in financial abuse by withholding marital assets. He submitted the forged beneficiary form as evidence. He claimed I was violating the divorce decree. He demanded immediate release of the pension funds. It was exactly what I'd expected, and it was exactly what the state attorney general's office needed. They filed charges 3 days later. The legal proceedings moved faster than I'd expected. When you have clear evidence of fraud, forged signatures, false documents, a documented timeline of deception, prosecutors tend to move quickly. And when the fraud involves attempting to steal $2 million from a pension fund, they move even faster. Patricia was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there, but Marcus called to tell me about it. They arrested her at her house. Brandon and Jessica were there. Apparently, it got dramatic. Lots of screaming, accusations, Jessica crying. The neighbors called the news stations. It's all over social media. How are Brandon and Jessica? Not arrested, if that's what you're asking. Yet. But they've been named as persons of interest. The DA thinks they were involved in the planning stages, but proving it might be harder. And Patricia's lawyer? Suspended pending ethics investigation. Turns out this isn't the first time he's been involved in questionable beneficiary claims. The state bar is looking into his entire practice. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. My attorney advised me that I'd need to appear, to testify, to face Patricia in court. "Are you ready for that?" David asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Does it matter if I'm ready? Not really. You'll have to do it either way. But it would help if you were prepared for how it might feel. How should it feel? However it feels. There's no right answer. Some people feel triumphant. Some feel sad. Some feel nothing at all. All of those are valid. I drove back to the city the day before the hearing. I didn't stay at the house. That was still technically marital property until the divorce was finalized, and I had no desire to be there. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown, something nice but not extravagant, with a view of the river and room service and silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the retirement dinner, about the moment Brandon had dropped the envelope on the table, about Patricia's face when I'd signed the papers without argument. I kept thinking about all the small moments I'd ignored. The way Patricia had asked too many questions about my pension plan, the way Brandon had joked about securing the bag, the way Jessica had always seemed to be calculating something behind her eyes. I kept thinking about how I'd wanted so desperately not to be alone that I'd ignored every warning sign. At 2 a.m, I got up and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Patricia was probably awake too, in her own house that she might lose, thinking about her own future that had just imploded, maybe wondering how it had all gone so wrong. Did I feel sorry for her? I wasn't sure. I felt sorry for the person I'd thought she was. But that person had never existed. The courthouse was crowded. Apparently a case involving attempted pension fraud, a forged signature, and a betrayal at a retirement dinner had captured public attention. The local news had covered it. Social media had opinions. People showed up to watch like it was entertainment. I arrived early with David, and we sat in a small conference room while he reviewed what would happen. They'll call you to testify. They'll ask about the signature, about the timeline, about the beneficiary forms. Just answer truthfully. Don't elaborate. Don't get emotional. Just state facts. Okay. Patricia's lawyer will cross-examine. He'll try to paint this as a misunderstanding, claim she thought she was authorized, suggest you're vindictive. Don't take the bait. Stay calm. I will. And Richard, David looked at me seriously. When you see her, when you're in the same room, it might be harder than you think. You were married to this woman. You built a life with her. That doesn't just disappear because she betrayed you. I know. Do you? I thought about that. I think so. The courtroom was exactly like you'd see on TV, with paneling, a judge's bench, a witness stand, rows of seats for observers. It smelled like old paper and floor wax and tension. Patricia was already seated at the defendant's table with her new attorney. Apparently the original one was too busy being disbarred. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, like the events of the past few weeks had physically diminished her. She wore a conservative navy suit and minimal makeup, clearly trying to look sympathetic. She didn't look at me when I entered. Brandon and Jessica were in the gallery, sitting in the front row behind their mother. Brandon's jaw was tight, his arms crossed. Jessica's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Marcus was there too, along with several colleagues from the firm. Sarah Chun, my accountant. Margaret from the pension administrator's office. Even Jimmy, the night security guard, had shown up. People I'd worked with. People who knew me. People who believed me. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s named Catherine Walsh. She had a reputation for being thorough and fair, which was exactly what I'd hoped for. The hearing began with opening statements. Catherine laid out the case methodically. The timeline of my retirement announcement, the sudden marriage changes, the forged beneficiary form, the attempted theft of pension funds, the elaborate planning that suggested premeditation. This isn't a case of a misunderstanding, she said. This is a case of calculated fraud. Miss Thornton didn't make an error. She didn't misinterpret paperwork. She systematically planned and executed a scheme to steal $2 million from her husband by forging his signature on legal documents. And when he discovered the fraud, she doubled down, filing false legal claims and attempting to use the court system to enforce her theft. Patricia's attorney countered with a different narrative, a difficult divorce, a confused spouse who thought she was entitled to benefits, misunderstandings about community property, vindictive accusations from a bitter ex-husband. Patricia Thornton made mistakes, he conceded. But mistakes are not crimes. She believed in good faith that she had a right to these pension benefits. She relied on advice from counsel. She acted based on her understanding of California's community property laws. And when Mr. Thornton cruelly cut her off from all financial support, she sought legal remedies through proper channels. It was a good defense, I'd give him that. It just wasn't true. I was called to testify first. Walking to the witness stand felt surreal, like moving through water or a dream. I was sworn in, the whole hand-on Bible routine that seems performative until you're actually doing it. And then I sat down. Catherine approached with a kind smile. Mr. Thornton, can you tell the court about your career? I worked in financial advisory for 40 years. I was a senior partner at Grayson & Associates. And during that career, did you develop expertise in retirement planning and pension benefits? Yes, it was a significant part of my practice. So you understand how pension beneficiary designations work. Very well. I've helped hundreds of clients set up their own. And your own pension, how is it structured? I explained about the trust, about the beneficiary designations, about the protections I'd put in place. Why did you create a trust for your pension benefits? To ensure my assets were distributed according to my wishes, and to protect them in case of unforeseen circumstances. Did you ever authorize Patricia Thornton to change your pension beneficiary designation? No. Did you ever sign a form requesting that she be named as sole beneficiary of your pension? No. Did you ever go to a notary's office with Patricia to execute such a form? No. I never signed any form like that. Catherine introduced exhibits. The forged form, the forensic analysis, security footage from the notary's office showing Patricia entering a loan, phone records showing coordination with her attorney. Mr. Thornton, can you identify this signature? She showed me the forged form. I looked at it carefully. It's meant to look like mine, but it's not. The pressure is wrong. The letter formations are different. It's a simulation of my signature, not my actual signature. How can you be certain? I've signed thousands of documents over 40 years. I know my own signature. This isn't it. When did you first become aware that someone had forged your signature on this form? When I began investigating the pension claim after the divorce filing, I requested copies of all beneficiary forms on file, and I saw this. I immediately knew it wasn't legitimate. Patricia's attorney stood. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is not a handwriting expert. Your Honor, Catherine responded. A person is qualified to identify their own signature. Mr. Thornton's testimony is admissible. Additionally, we have expert testimony to corroborate his identification. Overruled. The witness may answer. Catherine continued. What did you do when you discovered the forged form? I contacted my attorney and the pension administrator. I requested a forensic analysis, and I ensured that no funds would be distributed based on fraudulent documents. Did you at any point authorize Patricia Thornton to access your pension benefits? No. Did you intend for her to receive your pension in the event of divorce? No. My trust specifically excluded her as a beneficiary in the event of divorce. And yet she attempted to claim those benefits anyway? Yes. Using forged documents? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. No further questions. Patricia's attorney stood for cross-examination. He was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from winning cases you shouldn't have won. Mr. Thornton, isn't it true that you were angry about the divorce? I was hurt. And surprised. Surprised? Surely you knew the marriage was in trouble. I didn't actually. You expect this court to believe that you had no idea your wife was unhappy? People can hide things, I said, especially when they're planning something. Or maybe you knew exactly what was happening and you're retaliating now by making false accusations. The signature is forged, I said calmly. That's not an opinion. That's a fact proven by forensic analysis. You have a trust that excluded your wife from your pension. Doesn't that suggest you were planning for divorce? It suggests I was being prudent. I'd been widowed once. I understood the importance of estate planning. Or it suggests you never really considered Patricia to be your real wife. I considered her my wife until she handed me divorce papers at my retirement dinner. You're bitter. I'm telling the truth. You signed those divorce papers without any argument. What? That was a good question. I thought about how to answer it honestly, because I realized in that moment that fighting would have been futile. She'd already made her decision. She'd already set this in motion. And I decided I'd rather preserve my dignity than make a scene. So you gave up? No. I chose not to fight the divorce. But I'm absolutely fighting the fraud. You could have simply given her the pension. Community property laws in California would support her claim to a portion of it. A portion, perhaps. But she didn't want a portion. She wanted it all. And she was willing to forge documents to get it. He tried a few more angles, but his heart wasn't in it. The evidence was too clear. The forensics were too definitive. Finally, he sat down. No further questions. The forensic document examiner testified next, a woman named Dr. Sarah Reeves who had testified in hundreds of cases. She explained in meticulous detail why the signature on the beneficiary form was forged, pressure patterns, letter formations, pen lifts, timing. In my expert opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, this signature was not written by Richard Thornton. It's a simulation, someone attempting to copy his signature, but it's clearly not authentic. Patricia's attorney tried to challenge her credentials, her methods, her conclusions. She shut him down with data and expertise, calmly explaining why his objections were scientifically invalid. The notary testified next, a nervous man who admitted that Patricia had come to his office alone, claiming her husband was running late, and asking if they could notarize the form anyway since they were already married. I should have refused, he said, looking miserable. But she was persuasive. She said it was just a formality. I didn't realize. I should have been more careful. Security footage was played showing Patricia entering and leaving the notary's office on the date in question. The timestamp matched the date on the forged form. I was not in the footage. Phone records showed calls between Patricia and her original attorney dating back 5 months before the retirement dinner, long before she'd filed for divorce. Text messages were introduced showing Brandon and Jessica discussing the plan and the timeline, and when we can access the money. Marcus testified about the pressure from Patricia's lawyer to expedite the pension distribution, about the aggressive tactics, about the false claims that the firm was illegally withholding funds. By the end of the day, the case was airtight. Patricia had forged my signature. Patricia had attempted to steal my pension. Patricia had orchestrated the entire scheme. And she'd been caught. The judge didn't need to deliberate long. I've reviewed the evidence presented, she said, looking directly at Patricia, and I find it overwhelming. Miss Thornton, you forged your husband's signature on legal documents. You attempted to steal $2 million through fraud. You used the legal system to try to enforce your theft. And you showed no remorse until you were caught. Patricia's face was pale, her hands trembling. I'm binding you over for trial on charges of forgery, fraud, and attempted theft. Bail is set at $500,000. Additionally, I'm issuing an emergency order freezing all your assets pending resolution of the criminal case and the divorce proceedings. You are prohibited from accessing any accounts, property, or assets that may have been acquired through fraud. Patricia's attorney stood. Your Honor, that's extremely prejudicial. It's appropriate given the severity of the charges and the evidence of planned flight risk. Your client was prepared to disappear with $2 million. I'm ensuring she can't disappear now. The gavel came down. Patricia was let out by bailiffs. She looked back once, her eyes meeting mine across the courtroom. I don't know what she expected to see in my face. Triumph, maybe. Or anger. Or satisfaction. What she saw was exhaustion. And that seemed to break something in her, because she looked away, shoulders slumping, as they led her through the door. The media coverage was intense. Retirement dinner betrayal. Wife attempts to steal husband's pension. Forged signature scheme unravels after dramatic divorce. Financial advisor outsmarts would-be pension thief. I didn't read most of it. I didn't need to. The story was simple enough. Woman marries older man, plans to steal his retirement funds, gets caught, faces justice. It had all the elements people loved. Betrayal, money, courtroom drama, a villain getting comeuppance. What the stories mostly missed was how sad it all was. Patricia took a plea deal 6 weeks later. Her attorney negotiated it down to avoid trial. She pled guilty to fraud and forgery in exchange for a reduced sentence. 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, full restitution of all legal fees I'd incurred defending myself. Brandon and Jessica were charged with conspiracy and accessory after the fact. They also took plea deals. Probation, community service, fines. They didn't go to prison, but they got criminal records that would follow them. The divorce was finalized quickly after that. The judge awarded Patricia nothing beyond what she'd brought into the marriage. Essentially, just her personal belongings and her car. The house, which had been purchased with my money, was sold. Half went to me, half went to covering Patricia's restitution payments. My pension remained intact, protected by the trust I'd established, untouched by the whole sordid affair. I should have felt victorious. I stayed in Haven Point. The cottage became my permanent residence. Mrs. Carlyle was happy to sell it to me for a fair price, and I spent several months fixing it up, replacing the roof, updating the kitchen, adding better insulation. I did most of the work myself, learning as I went, finding something meditative about physical labor after 4 decades of intellectual work. Marcus visited once, bringing a bottle of expensive scotch and an offer to come back to the firm as a consultant. "You don't need to retire," he said, sitting on my deck, watching the sunset. "You could work part-time, advise on complex cases, mentor the younger partners. The firm would love to have you." "I appreciate that," I said. "But I think I'm done with that world." "Are you sure?" "Richard, you're brilliant at what you do. It seems like a waste to just stop." "Maybe. But I spent 40 years building other people's financial security. I'd like to spend the next however many years actually enjoying my own life." "Is this enjoying your life? Hiding in a beach cottage?" "I'm not hiding. I'm recovering." He studied me for a moment. "Are you okay, Rich?" "Really? I don't know yet," I said honestly. "Ask me in a year." I started volunteering. There was a financial literacy program in Haven Point, teaching low-income residents about budgeting, saving, understanding credit. They needed someone to teach their advanced classes, retirement planning, estate planning, protecting assets. It was perfect. I taught 2 evenings a week, working with people who'd never had anyone explain how money actually worked, how to protect themselves, how to build something lasting. I helped single mothers set up trusts for their children. I helped elderly people understand their Medicare options. I helped young couples plan for the future. It was the most satisfying work I'd done in years. One of my students, a woman in her 50s named Teresa, approached me after class one evening. "Mr. Thornton, I just want to thank you. My ex-husband left me with nothing, and I thought I'd never be able to retire. But you helped me understand my options, and now I actually have a plan. You gave me hope." She hugged me, and I felt something crack open in my chest, some wall I'd built without realizing it. "You did the work, Teresa. I just showed you the path. Still, thank you. You're one of the good ones." One of the good ones. That night, sitting on my deck with a glass of wine, watching stars reflect off the ocean, I cried for the first time since Caroline died. Not because I was sad exactly. More because I was letting go of something I'd been carrying for a long time. The belief that my value came from what I could provide, from how useful I was, from what I could give to others. Patricia had seen me as a resource to extract. But that didn't mean that's all I was. Brandon called me once, about 6 months after the trial. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Richard, it's Brandon. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to say something." I waited. "I fucked up. We all did. Mom, Jess, me, we fucked up so bad. And I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am. Sorry, I mean. I'm really fucking sorry." "Why are you calling, Brandon?" "Because you deserved better. You were good to us. You tried to be a father, even though we didn't make it easy. And we repaid you by," his voice broke. "We destroyed everything. Mom's in prison. Jessica won't talk to me. I can't get a decent job because of my record. And it's all because we got greedy and stupid and we hurt you." "Yes," I said. "You did. Is there any way? I mean, I know we don't deserve it, but is there any way you could ever forgive us?" I thought about that question for a long time. "Brandon, forgiveness isn't about what you deserve. It's about what I need. And right now, what I need is distance. Maybe someday that'll change. But not now. That's fair. That's fair." He was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, I learned from this. I really did. I'm trying to be better. I'm working construction, paying my fines, going to therapy. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be some kind of player." "That's good, Brandon. I hope you succeed." "Thanks. And Richard, I really am sorry. I'll probably never stop being sorry." "Then maybe that's your path," I said. "Being sorry until you figure out how to be better." I hung up. I didn't hear from him again. A year after the retirement dinner, I was invited back to Grayson and Associates for their annual gala. I almost declined. The thought of walking back into that world, of facing all those people who'd witnessed my humiliation, felt overwhelming. But Marcus was insistent. Rich, you're a legend in this firm. People respect what you did, not just the career, but how you handled the Patricia situation. You didn't let her destroy you. You stood up for yourself with dignity. That matters. People want to honor that. So I went. I wore a suit, not the expensive one Patricia had picked out, but a comfortable one I'd bought myself. I drove down from Haven Point, checked into the same hotel I'd stayed at for the hearing, and prepared myself for whatever the night would bring. The gala was at the same hotel as my retirement dinner, but in a different ballroom. I found that grimly funny. The scene of my betrayal was literally down the hall. When I walked in, something unexpected happened. People applauded. Not politely, not perfunctorily, but genuinely. A standing ovation that started at the front of the room and rippled backward. Colleagues I'd worked with for decades, clients I'd advised, younger associates I'd mentored. They were all standing, clapping, some of them smiling, some of them with tears in their eyes. Marcus appeared at my elbow. Told you, he said. I was speechless. The evening proceeded more normally after that. Dinner, speeches, awards. But throughout it all, people kept approaching me, shaking my hand, telling me stories I'd forgotten about times I'd helped them, times I'd made a difference. You saved my client's business during that merger. You taught me how to actually talk to people, not just throw numbers at them. You always had time to listen, even when you were busy. You showed me what integrity looks like. Near the end of the evening, a young associate named Jennifer Chun, no relation to my accountant Sarah, approached me nervously. Mr. Thornton, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wondered if I could ask you something. Of course. I heard about what happened with your wife. The whole firm heard about it. And I wanted to know how you did it. How you stayed calm. How you didn't let her destroy you. I thought about that question. I didn't stay calm, I said. I fell apart. I hid in a motel for 3 days. I disappeared. I cried on a deck in Haven Point watching the ocean. I felt all the things you're supposed to feel when someone betrays you. But you still won. I didn't win, Jennifer. I protected myself. That's different. Winning would have meant the betrayal never happened. But it did happen, and I can't change that. All I could do was refuse to let it define me. How? By remembering who I was before Patricia. By remembering that my value doesn't come from being useful to someone who wants to use me. By surrounding myself with people who see me as a person, not a resource. And by understanding that revenge and justice are different things. What's the difference? Revenge is about making them hurt because you hurt. Justice is about making sure they can't hurt anyone else. I didn't pursue this to hurt Patricia. I pursued it because she forged documents and attempted theft, and those things have consequences. Jennifer nodded slowly. That makes sense. The other thing I learned, I continued, is that you can't protect yourself from betrayal by being paranoid or suspicious. You protect yourself by being careful and prepared, but you still have to trust people. Otherwise, you're just alone. Are you still alone? Sometimes. But that's different from lonely. I'm building something now that's just mine. And that feels like enough. At the end of the evening, Marcus pulled me aside. There's someone who wants to talk to you, he said. In the conference room down the hall. He led me to a small conference room where an older woman was waiting. She was elegantly dressed, probably in her 70s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Mr. Thornton, I'm Helen Grayson. I was married to the firm's founder. I knew who she was, though we'd never formally met. She'd been widowed young, had raised 3 children on her own, had eventually remarried, and lived quietly while her late husband's firm grew into something significant. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Grayson. Please, call me Helen. I wanted to talk to you because I heard what happened with your wife, with the pension, with everything. And I wanted to tell you something that I think you need to hear. She gestured for me to sit, and she sat across from me. When my first husband died, she said, I was 34 years old with 3 children under 10. He'd built this firm from nothing, but he'd never set up proper insurance, never created trusts, never protected us. He thought he had time. And when he died suddenly in a car accident, I discovered that his business partners were planning to buy me out for pennies on the dollar, taking advantage of my grief and my ignorance about business. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating. It was. But it also taught me something important. People will take advantage of vulnerability if you let them. Not because they're evil, but because opportunity exists and they're weak enough to take it. My husband's partners weren't bad men. They were just men who saw a chance to benefit and didn't think about the cost to me. What did you do? I hired the best lawyer I could find. I fought them. I learned about the business. I became a partner myself. And I made sure that my children inherited what was rightfully theirs. She reached across the table and took my hand. Richard, what Patricia did to you wasn't personal. I know it feels personal, but it wasn't. She would have done it to anyone in your position. You were a resource to her, an opportunity. And when people see other people as resources, they lose sight of humanity. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. But it should make it clearer that her actions say everything about her and nothing about you. You were the same person before and after she betrayed you. Your value didn't change. Only her ability to steal it changed. Tears were running down my face now, though I wasn't sobbing, just leaking. Like something inside me had finally cracked all the way through. The firm is naming a scholarship in your honor, Helen continued. For students from low-income backgrounds who want to study finance. We'll fund it in perpetuity. Because your legacy isn't what Patricia tried to take from you. Your legacy is what you built over 40 years, what you taught people, how you showed them that integrity matters. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll let us honor you properly. Say you'll remember that one betrayal doesn't erase 4 decades of goodness. I nodded, unable to speak. She smiled and squeezed my hand one more time before standing to leave. At the door, she paused. Richard, the best revenge is living well. And from what I hear about your work in Haven Point, you're living very well indeed. 3 years after the retirement dinner, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Patricia. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity, or maybe something like closure, made me open it. Richard, I'm writing this from prison, where I have a lot of time to think about what I did and who I was. I've been going to therapy here, court mandated at first, but now I choose it. I've been trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could do what I did to you. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to take responsibility, not just in court-ordered ways, but in real, human ways. What I did to you was unforgivable. I saw you as a meal ticket, as a retirement plan, as a solution to my financial problems. I never saw you as a person. I manipulated you. I used your loneliness and your kindness against you. And when you were most vulnerable, at your retirement dinner, surrounded by people you respected, I tried to humiliate you into submission. I told myself I deserved your pension. I told myself you owed me for the 2 years I wasted being married to you. I told myself that older men who marry younger women should expect to pay. I created this whole narrative where I was justified. But I wasn't. I was just greedy and cruel. My children, Brandon and Jessica, they learned that cruelty from me. I raised them to see people as resources, to value money over relationships, to believe that taking care of yourself meant taking from others. And now they're paying the price too. Brandon can barely find work. Jessica won't speak to me. We destroyed our family, and it's my fault. I don't expect you to care about any of this. I don't expect sympathy. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did, and I'm trying, very slowly, very painfully, to become someone different. I hope you're well. I hope you found peace. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. Patricia. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it away. Did I forgive her? I didn't know yet. Maybe someday. Maybe never. But I appreciated that she was trying. I'm 67 now. I still live in Haven Point. I still teach financial literacy classes. I still volunteer at the community center. I still walk on the beach every morning and watch the sunrise and feel grateful to be alive. I've made friends here, real friends, people who know me as Richard the retired guy who helps people, not Richard the senior partner or Richard the pension theft victim. I play chess with the owner of the local bookstore. I help Mrs. Carlisle with her taxes. I go to potlucks and town meetings and feel like part of something real. Last year, I started dating someone. Her name is Anne. She's a widow, a retired teacher, smart and kind and funny. She knows my whole story, the retirement dinner, the betrayal, the trial, all of it. And she still likes me anyway. You're not damaged goods, Richard, she told me on our 3rd date, when I tried to warn her off. You're someone who survived something terrible with your integrity intact. That's not a red flag. That's incredibly attractive. We take things slow. We're both old enough to know that slow is okay, that there's no rush, That companionship doesn't require declarations or grand gestures. Sometimes we sit on my deck and watch the ocean and don't talk at all. It's perfect. The other day, a young couple came to my financial literacy class. Recently married, just starting out, trying to figure out how to build a life together on two modest incomes. After class, they asked if they could talk to me privately. We're getting married next month, the young woman, her name was Sophia, said. And we wanted to know about prenups and trusts and protecting ourselves. Not from each other. Her fiancé, David, added quickly. We love each other. We trust each other. But we've both seen marriages fall apart. We've both seen people get hurt. And we want to be smart about this. I looked at these two young people, so earnest and hopeful and scared, and I felt something that might have been pride. Being smart isn't the same as being cynical, I said. You can protect yourselves legally while still trusting each other emotionally. They're not mutually exclusive. How do you know? Sophia asked. I told them my story. Not all of it. They didn't need to hear about Patricia's betrayal or the retirement dinner or any of the painful details. But I told them about Caroline, about building a life together, about losing her to cancer, about the hospital bills that had nearly ruined me. We never had a prenup, I said. We never worried about protecting assets from each other. And that was right for us, because we were building everything together. But what we should have done was protect our assets from catastrophe. Better insurance, better estate planning, better preparation for the possibility that one of us might die young. So we should get life insurance? Yes, and disability insurance. And you should create wills and healthcare directives and talk about what you want if something happens. Not because you don't trust each other, but because you love each other enough to make the hard conversations easier. I helped them set up a basic financial plan. Emergency savings, retirement contributions, insurance policies, simple wills. Nothing fancy, but solid. A foundation. When they left, Sophia hugged me. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. You made this less scary. That's the point, I said. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, you know that the wound leaves scars. But scars are just proof that you healed. I think about that retirement dinner sometimes. The moment Brandon dropped the envelope on my table, the moment I realized what was happening, the moment I chose to sign the papers rather than fight. People have asked me why I signed. Why I didn't refuse, didn't make a scene, didn't fight back in that moment. The truth is, I signed because I was already 10 steps ahead. I signed because I knew the signature didn't matter. The trust protected me. The real documents were safe. The fraud would be discovered. I signed because letting them think they'd won was the only way to let them commit every fraudulent act I needed to build an airtight case. I signed because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is look someone in the eye, give them exactly what they think they want, and then walk away. The pen was a Mont Blanc, black and silver, a gift from people who actually valued me. The signature was firm and clear, my own handwriting, not a forgery, not a simulation, but genuinely mine. And when I walked out of that ballroom, I took my dignity with me. That was the real power move. Not the trial, not the conviction, not even the financial security I preserved. The power was in knowing my own worth, protecting what mattered, and refusing to let someone else's betrayal define me. This morning, I watched the sunrise from my deck with a cup of coffee and in sleeping quietly in the bedroom behind me. The ocean was calm, reflecting gold and pink and orange. Somewhere out there, Patricia was finishing her prison sentence. Brandon was working construction and trying to rebuild his life. Jessica was in therapy and trying to forgive her mother and herself. I hope they find peace. I hope they become better people. I hope they learn that you can't build a life on what you take from others. You can only build it on what you create yourself. As for me, I'm not waiting for anything anymore. I'm not building towards some future retirement or some deferred happiness. I'm just living, teaching people about money, walking on beaches, reading books, drinking coffee with someone I care about, watching sunrises, feeling grateful. The retirement dinner was supposed to be my ending. The culmination of 40 years, the moment everything came together, the celebration of a life well lived. Instead, it was a beginning of understanding that my value isn't my pension or my career or my usefulness. My value is my integrity, my kindness, my resilience, my willingness to help people even after I've been hurt, my capacity to start over. And nobody, no matter how much they try, no matter what documents they forge, no matter what schemes they plan. Nobody can take that from me, because I'm not what I have. I'm who I am, and I'm still here, still standing, still signing my own name to my own life, on my own terms. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else.